We wondered where we'd end up. We wondered what would happen to us if we didn't speak. Because when we were 16, we were in our bedroom. And we weren't mixing like other teenagers, going out, nightclubbing, and going to discos. So we wondered where we would end up. Whether we would end up staying in our bedroom right through our 20s, writing books, or whether we would go out, make friends, and get married, have kids. Wasn't to be, was it?
Welcome to Stat, I'm telling you all medical true crime stories, and it gets bizarre. Karen Wickham, yeah, she used to work in ER, and now she's sharing the knowledge, so let's get involved. Hey, funny and scary at the same time. Medical mysteries, all facts, she ain't lying. So tune in to Stat if you dare, cause crazy things can happen anytime, anywhere. Yeah.
Hello, everybody out there in podcast land. Welcome to Stat, Shocking Traumas and Treatments, and I am your host, Karen Wickham, coming to you from, where are we, Mary?
Beautiful Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Yes, indeed. That's where we are right now.
Or as Torontonians say, Toronto.
Well, some of us say Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And some other Canadians say that armpit of Canada.
Hey, we're not the armpit.
People don't like anybody outside of Toronto. They don't like us Torontonians. But anyway, I think we're great people. Most of us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we just listened to Jennifer Gibbons talking about how they were likely not going to have some kind of normal life as long as they were together. That you can see up until this point that they did hold each other down. They were keeping each other back from any kind of normalcy, but they just couldn't break the ties. They weren't allowed to go back to Eastgate, and they had no plans for their future education. Eastgate no longer wanted anything to do with them. They put a lot of time and energy, and I don't know if they just weren't prepared for these two, but I also think these twins were smart, angry, frustrated, stuck in their own worlds. And I think, there was definitely a devious streak between them, especially leaning more towards Jennifer. But yeah, I do think that they were running the place to a certain degree. And the staff were kind of traumatized by them and their behavior. And I think obviously very frustrated because they weren't able to help them in any way. So yeah, they weren't welcome back, but they also didn't help them to find anything further for their education.
How old were they at this time now?
14.
14, okay. Where the hell are the parents? What the hell are the parents doing?
I think that they're in their own little world too. Like they were hoping that these girls were going to snap out of it. The way I see it, the father...
They're 14. They've been doing this since, birth, basically. They're not snapping out of it.
Well, the father was a very sort of misogynistic type. Okay, wife does all the work, raises the kids, takes care of the house. All he has to do is go to work and come home, and everything should be as it should. The mom is... seemingly to be like a very kind, quiet, more not wanting to rock the boat woman, and she had already so much on her hands with her whole home family, and I think she was worried. So she, in a sense, froze and just hoped for the best. But either way, they didn't fulfill their parental responsibility, and you got to look at the times and all this other kind of stuff.
I get it's different now. If your kid is not developing properly, you're at the doctor right away, right?
Yeah. And there's still this sort of magical thinking towards twins. They're unique. They're their own. They'll snap out of it at some point. There's still sort of magical thinking about twins.
But talking is socializing. No wonder they were so messed up with other people.
Again, I don't know so much if it was being neglectful as being scared and not really knowing what to do, with the mom and the father being like, well, it's not my problem. It's your problem. So they went home, not enrolled in school. They got accepted for unemployment benefits because everyone had given up on them, especially themselves. These two twins had no social skills, only 2 high school credits between them, and they were living in their own little world. And people had no idea, including them, how to be able to function at a job. It seemed preposterous. Like, what are they going to do? Where are they going to work? Is there a job where you don't have to talk to people? Or at the very least, communicate with your bosses, right?
Maybe worked in a mortuary.
Still, you still have to talk to someone, right?
I know.
So they gave themselves a self-imposed prison sentence, with the jail cell being their bedroom. They had their meals delivered to their room by their mom or their sister Rosie, younger sister Rosie. And Rosie was the only person that they would talk to. She shared a room with the twins. And I think part of the reason they wanted to have her around is because they used her as a maid, like an errand girl. So she was bringing food to them, doing some chores for them, and anything they wanted outside of the house, they'd be demanding and say, go get this, get that. And she would do it. And the only day that they would leave their home was to go out and get their unemployment check. The other siblings, Greta and David, were disgusted by their behavior and wanted nothing to do with them. They couldn't believe that their parents allowed them to be so disrespectful and demanding, and they were running the household and causing so much tension and stress. And here are some examples I'm just going to go through quickly. If they wanted to watch a specific TV show, they like Top of the Pops, they would leave a message on the table telling the family members the time and the date of when they wanted to watch the show and to leave the door open to the living room. So what they would do was sit at the bottom of the stairs, look through the living room doorway, and watch the show. And if anybody got up to go to the bathroom or do something, they would run upstairs and hide. And they were constantly spying on everybody in the house. So even though they spent their time up in their room, when they weren't doing what they were doing in the room, they were sneaking around and spying on everyone. Now, that would drive me nuts.
It's just
if you get up to go to the bathroom and it's like, pew, they're gone. Like, what is wrong with you?
Are they like afraid of cats?
No, they're just...
It's weird. So they would leave a note, like a handwritten note.
Yeah, I want to watch Top of the Pops on Tuesday at 7 p.m.
And they'd sit at the bottom of the stairs, and if anybody came by...
They'd run away. And then they'd go back down. And they were spying on people all the time. If you leave a note saying, I want to watch this at this time, leave the door open, I'd be like, yeah, well, come sit down and ask me. Ridiculous. Again, their behaviors were, tolerated.
Yeah, exactly. I could understand why the older siblings were kind of like, all right, come on.
Yeah, they were sort of done with them pretty early on. After they got out of the cute stage and they were into this devious stage, they were just like, we want nothing to do with this. So they were no longer allowed to go to any family events or celebrations after their behavior at Greta's wedding. So here's a quote from the book, The Silent Twins by Marjorie. What?
I was just going to say, you're telling us now what they did at Greta's wedding?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
yeah. It's a quote from the book, The Silent Twins by Marjorie Wallace, that I've, been researching a lot through this book. Okay. Quote, at Greta's wedding the previous year, the twins' unresponsive behavior had cast a blight on the whole occasion. For 4 hours they stood, eyes fixed on the floor, their arms hanging awkwardly in front of them. They refused to acknowledge the bride, the groom, or any of the guests. End of quote. Their behavior was so bad that their parents were barely home. David couldn't stand the twins and he wanted to move out ASAP, and they pretty much had the house to themselves. At the age of 16, they lived in a fantasy world of dolls. It was a rich world. Jennifer, June, and Rosie each played a role. The intricacies of this world was astounding. The twins and Rosie would talk through these dolls.
Yeah, dear, I'll get back to you this stuff. I must show you where I'm doing this nice dress. Thank you. Steps going down the steps. I'm seeing that through the door. Hi, Neil. Sure nice to see you. Hi, you. Boy, you look smashing in those clothes. You look lovely in that dress. Don't you? She looks lovely. Let's go. Bye. Gina's mother called after her. What time are you coming back home? About 9 or 10, okay? Won't be long anyway. Don't come back too late. I won't. Bye. This enjoyable story was a good story, wasn't it, about 3 girls? Then, Lydia was played by Rosemary, Gina was played by Jennifer, and Nina was played by June. I don't remember who they were. That's the end of this familiar happy story. And we say goodbye from Nina first. Goodbye. And Gina, goodbye. And Lydia, goodbye. So long. The time is 9:35, and time for the news with Richard Baker.
They made them clothes. They set up the room as a home for the dolls. There was even a church where they would have full services. They'd make little furniture, sewed many outfits. They even made perfect little miniature books and wrote stories, tiny little stories with tiny little pictures inside these books.
Wow.
They had a tape deck that they used to play church music when they would do a sermon, or they would record themselves as they were playing. June wrote stories. Like, she wrote all the stories, the backstories, everything for what they were going to be playing out. And settings, character roles, you name it. And then she would cut them up into little pieces and hand them out to Jennifer and Rosie, and they were supposed to read their lines and follow these stories.
So like little scripts. Basically.
Yes. And these stories got increasingly more bizarre and violent.
Not surprising.
Here's one of the stories that, of course, June wrote it.
Okay.
Quote.
Oh, June wrote it or Jennifer?
No, June did all the writing.
Oh, June did all the writing? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was Jennifer, sorry.
No. Okay. Quote. This is the sad and lonely story about a boy named Wesley Gavin Miller. He was born in Philadelphia, USA, the son of Mr. and Mrs. Miller, who later divorced and gave him away for adoption. You must understand the sympathy given to Wesley until he went to live with his new parents, Mr. Danny Miller and his wife, Tressie. The tragedy struck for little Wesley, who came all the way from Philadelphia to live the rest of his short life in fear. Why did the Lord pick on a little innocent boy to be slowly battered and made his life hell? Why, oh why? It was a hot summer day in June 1975 that Tressie and Danny Miller waited outside the American-styled home to greet their child, who had been flown from America with a social worker, Mrs. McKay of Washington. 2 minutes later, a car drew up. Out came a slim young woman, and pulled out by his hand was a little boy no more than 3 feet tall. He had masses of thick brown hair, freckles on his nose, and a cheeky, happy face. Hi, Wesley. These are your new parents. How do you do? Said Tressie Miller, looking at the boy. Mr. Miller said nothing, but you could tell from the look in his eyes that he hated Wesley from the very start. End quote, or end of the book, end of the story. That's a bit dark. So the doll families grew and shrank with life and death. There were marriages, divorces, there were villains and heroes, parties, graduations, funerals, weddings. And one of Rosie's roles was to be the registrar of births, deaths, and marriages. Okay. So she recorded them in a notebook. And many of these entries were pretty gruesome. So here are some of them. I'm going to read through some.
Recording all the
as written out and decided upon by June.
Right.
These are all the stories and of the births, deaths, and marriages of this doll world that was really, it was real to them. Okay. Samantha Miller, age 6, operation on face, never succeeded. Some of them are kind of funny.
Operation on face.
And never succeeded, so I wonder what they were trying to do. Ann Miller, age 6, operation on both eyes, never succeeded, glasses worn. June Gibbons, age 9, died of leg injury. George Gibbons, age 4, died of eczema. What the hell?
Some bad eczema.
Bluey Gibbons, age 2.5, died of appendix. George Gibbons, fatally struck down by a back injury. Peter Gibbons.
What? Fatally struck
down by a back injury. Peter Gibbons, age 5, adopted, presumed dead. Like, what the?
Presumed dead?
Yeah, and this one. Julie Gibbons, age 2.5, died of a stamped stomach. Polly Morgan Gibbons, age 4, died of a slit face. Susie Pope Gibbons died of a cracked skull. Wesley Miller, who we just talked about, it turns out he ended up dying of battering. And Randy...
Like being beaten, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Randy and Rebecca Miller, twins, age 10, died of cremation burial with fire. So they burnt them alive.
Okay, so all of them either have their own last name or Miller.
Which is interesting. That, exactly. And one of them was named June Gibbons. And it was June Gibbons that wrote it. So I found it interesting that it was like, their same last names. But, kids play, they say what they know.
Right.
But in the same token, they're 16. So anyway, the twins also tortured their dolls, ripping off their arms and legs and heads. And
of course they did.
Yeah, playing out gruesome scenes, reattaching them in a Frankenstein-like manner. And they had a deep-seated rage for each other, which is the tone throughout the story and the world around them. They often fantasized about murder and suicide. They wanted to be free of each other. And June started to self-harm. She would take a penknife and make cuts into her wrist, deep enough that they would bleed freely. Her mom, Gloria, knew this was happening, and she would try to comfort her, try to, help her through it. However, June and Rosie would laugh and torment her. They would make fun of her. So you can see this.
Oh, I thought the mom. You're saying, they'd torment her. Okay.
Oh, yeah, June. So she's crying out for help, cutting herself, and her sisters are laughing at her and tormenting her and making fun of her. So this just deepened June's hate for Jennifer. And like we talked about before, these twins did nothing halfway. They had obsessive personalities. They would go hard all the way on something until something else caught their eye. So, examples. They didn't talk to people. That's pretty big.
Yeah.
The extreme mimicking behavior of each other. The fantasy world with the dolls. So the doll world they lived in essence, kept them from growing up emotionally and psychologically. However, it couldn't stop them from growing up physically. Okay? But they did try for a little while. For a while there, they bound their breasts. They didn't want to look. They didn't want to grow up. So they saw an ad for a correspondence course for a writing school, and they decided that this would be their career. They were going to become famous authors. And the woman that wrote the book, Silent Twins, Marjorie Wallace, she spent 20 or more years communicating with these guys. In fact, I think to this day, she still communicates with June. And she wrote everything that she could get her hands on of theirs. And she said there was over 1 million words written by them. So I'm going to play a clip here of June talking about this, okay?
All night long, typing our books out. Adamant that we were going to be writers of some sort. If we couldn't speak and express ourselves, we would express ourselves in our books. And we had to do something to make the family feel proud of us. Write books. There's something to be proud of, isn't it? We can't speak, can't contribute in a normal way. We do it in a different way. Write books and be bestsellers and let our family feel proud of us. Now the twins have written books. They're famous. They're so nice.
In January 1980, they each got diaries for Christmas, and they began journaling every day. And soon after that, they were writing all day and into the early hours of the morning. Most of their stories took place in an American setting. They had a deep fascination with all things American. To them, the USA was a utopia. By mid-January 1980, June had written her first novel, and it was called Pepsi Cola Addict. And this was actually published. And I'll explain in a minute. So this is what the story is about. It's about a 14-year-old by the name of Preston Wadley King, who lives with his mother and sister, and he loves Pepsi. And there's some, reference in the book that he would drink 300 Pepsis a day. They are very poor, living in Malibu, and Preston falls in love with a girl named Peggy, who doesn't share his same feelings. Preston himself is being pursued by a gay guy by the name of Ryan. And Preston gets seduced by his music teacher, and they begin to have a sexual relationship. He ends up becoming a drifter, ending up in prison, where he is almost raped and killed. He's abandoned by all he loves. He gets released from prison and goes to his mother's empty apartment where there are barbiturates, and he takes a whole bunch of them. And just after that, he gets a call from Peggy saying she loves him, and while he was on the phone with her, he gets stabbed in the heart and dies.
Wow.
Yeah. Hey, maybe a really good book. I mean, they were amazing writers. They were very talented. But it just kind of shows you...
Well, they have, like, imaginations, of course.
Yeah.
Twisted a bit at times.
So June and Jennifer had no idea how to get their work published. So what June did is she went while they were trying to figure it out, there was a publishing company called New Horizons Publishing. And what they would do is that if they accepted your novel, they would publish your book for you, but you would have to pay them to do so. Because not every publishing company is going to say, I want this and here's some money for it. Anyway, so she got 1,000 copies published. I'm not sure what happened after that. I know that there is one or two floating around right now, but it's impossible to find because I thought, the Holy Grail, the Pepsi Cola book. And I'm like, I must have that. And it's just not to be had. Apparently, there's someone out there that has a photocopied version of it. But I'm like, I want it. Anyway, but Jennifer would never have any of her books or poetry, they wrote a lot of poetry as well, published. And this would be another source of disappointment and jealousy and hatred from Jennifer to June. But this didn't stop Jennifer from trying, though. She wrote with even more fury. Jennifer's stories were more macabre. She wrote about voodoo, black magic, and the paranormal. And the one story that stands out and considered one of her best is called The Pugilist. And this story involves like open heart surgeries being performed in people's kitchens, a heart transplant from a dog to a human, death of children, and other violent deaths. So on and on they went, writing day and night. And it was, I think, one part obsessive need to become famous and recognized for their novels and poetry, and one part obsessive need to outdo the other. Mm-hmm. The longer they were cooped up in the room together, the more they hated each other. And each wanted to be a separate individual, but they feared that if they set out to be independent, the other would have a better life. They both wanted to be married and have children, especially June. She really wanted to have a child. But if they separated, well, what if you're happier than me? What if you're more loved than me? What if you get the things that we desire and I don't get them? So they glued themselves together even more. So instead of trying to pursue being happy, they stayed stuck because they couldn't stand it if the other person achieved that or achieved more of that. So they stayed together and they watched each other's every move. With the rage, you can imagine this rage and resentment growing. And they were depressed. They had this feeling of hopelessness and that they were wasting their lives away, and continuous thoughts of suicide and murder. The theme still is here that they're so insightful, but completely delusional at the same time.
Yeah, they know. It's so frustrating.
Yeah. So at 18, they could no longer pretend their way out of adulthood. They could no longer the physical, emotional, and hormonal changes that had come with adulthood. And this led to their next obsession, the opposite sex. Dating, relationships, and the desire to be married and have children. And of course, they wanted that all at once. Mm-hmm. We're going to meet someone, and this is all just going to happen. So from 0 to married with children. So they started to put effort into their appearance. They were no longer binding their breasts. And so this is how they started out with this. They bought a pair of binoculars and started spying on everybody in the neighborhood, searching for male prospects. So they just can't say, hang out, go for walks, or go to a park or something. They're like, they get binoculars and are watching people. So they caught this 15-year-old by the name of Darren caught their eye, and they would leave him love letters and things in his mailbox under his door, but they wouldn't leave their name or address or phone number or any way to meet in person. To them, I guess it was sort of just pursuing this, but not being able to take it one step further. So obviously this wasn't working. So they decided to do something else. They got some books on, and this would carry on throughout the rest of their lives. They bought some books on the occult, witchcraft, black magic, self-hypnosis, and mind over matter. And they tried to cast spells and have ceremonies to conjure spirits. They made potions with their own blood. They did secret rituals and made voodoo dolls. And yeah, so like, again, it's this fantasy world they live in where I believe they actually believe this could work. So this desire to have these things, but no idea how to achieve them. So they did this. Just before Christmas 1980, they committed their first crime. They stole 2 teddy bears from a post office. And this was the beginning of a big downhill spiral for them. They also bought some magazines to seek out pen pals. So this makes more sense. You know, they could write to people. They wouldn't have to, speak to them face to face. But their letters were weird.
Because they have no social skills.
But they were on the right track at least. So maybe if we write to people, because they, like I said, they were incredible writers. And by the spring of 1981, all their attempts to make friends and get boyfriends had failed. So June and Jennifer remembered an American boy that they had met while going to Eastgate, and his name was Lance Kennedy. His father was in the military, and he was doing a 4-year stint in Wales. And the Kennedys were comprised of 4 brothers and a stepmother. So because he showed them some kindness while they were in Eastgate, they thought, okay, well, he's the perfect guy. Let's find out where he lives. And they did whatever it took to find out. They were making phone calls like out of a phone book. Like every call. Every number they can come up with. They were calling switchboards. They were calling everything to try to find out who these people were. So, first of all, they're the silent twins. But when they want to, get something, they use their voice. But could you imagine all that obsessive time and effort to find this phone number of this?
Or did they get Rosie to call?
No, they did. They did it.
Because even when they speak, you can still hear there's an impediment.
Yes. But still, they would speak when they had to, or they felt they needed to. So after much effort and harassment, they were able to get his parents' phone number. And they called the house constantly, like hundreds of times a day. And when they would pick up the phone on the other end, they would hear giggling. Like, how creepy. Like, you pick up your phone, or it'd be dead silence. Or there would be a girl that would come on with an American accent whose name was Lisa Ford. So that was June or Jennifer pretending to be American, and they came up with the name Lisa Ford. So they finally gathered enough courage to speak to one of the brothers on the phone. Only it was a brother by the name of Wayne. Lance had gone back to the U.S. to join the military. So then they started to try to forge some kind of relationship with Wayne. So Wayne, this family, these sons were really messed up. Like, they're very disturbed.
A perfect match.
Yeah. Wayne was a lazy moocher who didn't go to school. He worked part-time jobs, and he lived off his parents, and they all had, they were womanizers. Even though they were only young, but they still had no respect for females. He was a liar and a thief. Wayne invited them to a nearby town or a town nearby to where they lived. And he told them that they lived by this dingy biker hotel. So on their 18th birthday, decided to take a cab to the hotel in an attempt to find out where they lived. So when they got there, they start rummaging through the garbage for clues. How did they figure they were going to figure out in a bar garbage there's going to be a letter? Lance Kennedy lives at, again, where their brains were at. And maybe, again, it's just this magical fantasy world where it's like, okay, well, we'll be detectives and we'll find out this way. They were kicked off the property. Mm-hmm. So then they began to walk around town to see if they could find the house to where they lived. They walked day and night. Ended up pouring rain. They ended up sleeping beside a phone booth. This is their birthday. So early in the morning, they tried calling the house again. This time, Wayne answered, and he said, okay, I'll meet you up at a coffee shop. He didn't show up. So after 24 hours of not eating, sleeping in the cold rain, they walked home. But this did not stop them. But they did stick to their own neighborhood for a little while, and they would walk around the neighborhoods dressing as boys. and pretending to be boys. They continued to commit petty theft and wanted to hang out with the bad kids in the neighborhood, the hooligans. But they continued to search for where the Kennedys lived, and eventually they found out. On April 21st, 1981, they took a cab to the tiny town of Welsh Hook and got dropped off at the cottage where the Kennedys lived. But instead of going to the front door and knocking, they snuck around to the back of the house and peeped into the windows. They saw that there was no one home. They checked the door and found it unlocked. They entered the house and ransacked it. They went absolutely nuts inside this house, giggling and laughing and running around, making sandwiches. They stole pictures. They went into the bedrooms, but the bedrooms were locked. So they grabbed chairs and were bashing open and breaking chairs to get into the bedrooms to rummage through the family stuff. They were trying on clothes, reading letters, just being as destructive and intrusive as you can possibly imagine. Eventually, they tired themselves out and made some coffee and sandwiches and sat on the couch and watched TV.
What the fuck?
When they heard a car pull up into the driveway, they tried to escape, but they were caught escaping. And the father, George Kennedy, had arrived home with his wife. So the kids were in this order: Jerry, Lance, Wayne, and Carl. So I talked about the 4 boys. So Jerry, Lance, Wayne, and Carl. They weren't home with them. Just, he comes home, day of work with his wife. And here are these crazy girls.
And the place is like upside down.
Absolutely trashed. Okay, so just to give a bit of background, I told you that the boys were troubled. Their mother had committed suicide by shooting herself in front of them.
Oh, jeez.
George was rarely home and had very little to do with them. They were always moving from place to place. They had a stepmother. And his sons, especially Carl. Carl, the youngest, was the most messed up. And he was absolutely spoiled and allowed to do whatever he wanted. But nothing was addressed in terms of everything else. So
I can't imagine the trauma.
Yeah. So you'll see that he's an absolute sociopath. And he would have the most contact with the twins in the long run. And yeah, you'll see. Anyway, George questioned the twins, asking them why they had broken into their home and if they were the ones that had been calling day and night. Of course, the twins didn't answer the questions. And he thought, okay, well, maybe of calling the police, but the police were always being called on his kids. So he thought, no. Oh. And he called them a cab and said, go home. Don't come back. Don't call. That's it. But remember that once the twins got obsessed with something, they wouldn't let it go. Mm-hmm. They would push further past any obstacle that got in their way. The next day, they broke in the house again and went through all of Wayne's things. They figured out his room and they left without getting caught. 2 days later, they returned. Only this time, they broke into a church close to their home, bought some fish and chips, sat back and dined in the church. After that, they headed over to the Kennedy's house. They broke in by smashing a window. And they used the phone to start making prank phone calls. And they took a cab day after day after day to Welsh Hook for weeks. Sometimes they went into the house or the church. Sometimes they hung around town and followed Wayne and Jerry around. I've got a clip about from June talking about this time.
We fell in love with them. All of them. Her family. All the American boys. So we fell in love with them. We became besotted over them. So every day we get up in the morning, we go out and see them. All the way to Welsh Hook. We had £900 to earn money every week. I was paying all the money in taxi fares. So come rain, come shine, we'd be out there. Dressed up, makeup, hats, wigs, whatever, clothes. I would say, look at the Welsh Hook and see the boys.
By then they were smoking cigarettes and weed and drinking alcohol. They were also introduced to sniffing glue.
Oh, my God.
They were high and drunk or both the majority of their waking hours. Now, I'm just going to play another clip here for you about why they enjoyed being intoxicated.
I felt like a release. Okay, we speak now and be ourselves. Lose our inhibitions and be ourselves. and come out and speak properly and laugh and talk like normal teenagers. And we come back about midnight at night time, stumble back drunk into the house upstairs, about our diaries, and say what we'd done in the diaries. Then we'd say, let's go out again.
That chingy sound you're hearing in the background is like she has like 50 bracelets. Like she wears 50
I was wondering
bracelets.
about that. I could hear like some sort of metal noisy thing in the background.
That's her bracelets.
So when she's talking, she's moving her arm or hands.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, there you have it. She's saying that, you know, they were able to be themselves. They were able to talk. They were able to relax. They were able to let the anxiety
courage, go. Right? Like that's what people, you know, sometimes say. They
help them feel normal. Yeah.
To lose their inhibitions and
So they spent most of their money on booze, drugs, and cabs, and they did little to no writing at that time. To them, life was exciting. They were having fun for the first time in their lives, and they started to think that Wayne was their boyfriend. Of course, they shared Wayne. Even though there was nothing like that going on, in their mind, he was their boyfriend. And they were going down the wrong path. Things were going to get a whole lot worse. Like I said, Carl Kennedy, who was only 14, but would have a lot of influence on them, was the youngest brother and the most troubled. In fact, like I said, he was a sociopath. His family didn't, like, other than his father, his brothers didn't like him at all because even he was too much for them. Wayne wanted to stop seeing June and Jennifer because he felt that they were too strange and too obsessive. And that's when Carl stepped in, took his place. Now, Carl was ruthless when it came to attending to his own needs. If he wanted it, he took it. And he didn't care about the consequences. He was violent and cruel. He had no empathy or compassion. And he just loved to use people up. What he saw in June and Jennifer was an opportunity to have some vindictive fun. Now, he liked Jennifer over June because Jennifer seemed to enjoy the same things as him. June was more quiet and sensitive, therefore not fun. So
Jennifer was more psycho like him.
Yeah. And they would beat the shit out of each other. Like slap, punch, throw each other across the room, and they enjoyed it.
Jennifer and Carl.
Okay. June didn't. She would just sit back and watch. So this is probably some of the weirdest series of events that I have come across. And that's saying a lot. Like, again, you know what they say, life is stranger than fiction. So before I tell you this is just one incident that they talked about, that on one of their trips down, because they become so obsessed with sex, and they were still virgins, and they, like I said, they were obsessed with sex, and they actually assaulted a cab driver on the way down one time.
Jesus.
Jennifer sitting in the front, she was, touching him inappropriately. June in the back was touching him from behind, and they were whispering and saying things to him, and he's like, get the fuck out. So, like I said, they were going to Wellshoek every day, spending most of their times at or with the Kennedys. So they really wanted to lose their virginity. They wanted things to move forward for them. And they both believed that they were madly in love with Carl, this rough and tumble, tough American boy.
Okay, so it wasn't Wayne anymore.
No, it was
First
Carl.
It was Lance, and then it was Wayne. Now it's Carl.
Yeah, because, even Wayne was like, no, they're too much. So most of their time, like I said, was getting drunk and high and fighting and watching TV or making out, things like that. So, while June sat back intoxicated, she would watch Jennifer and Carl do more and more crazy things. Okay, so on this one day, Jennifer, June, and Carl would go to the nearby church that I talked about, and they would continue on with their antics. So Carl Kennedy said to the girls, or to the twins, do you want to go to paradise? They said, yeah, we want to go to paradise.
Paradise by the dashboard.
Yeah. They went to the church, lit candles, drank brandy, smoked weed, and sniffed glue. Mm-hmm. So if you can picture this dark 14th century English church with candles going and, and all this other stuff happening. Carl went to the pulpit to do a sermon. And he asked the twins if they love God. They said yes. He said, well, then, in order to prove that you love God, you need to strip naked. They did. Then they removed all of his clothes. This is something out of like, I don't know what. Carl and Jennifer then laid on the carpet in front of the altar and had sex. So this is how she lost her virginity.
Wow.
This is what she wrote in her diary. Dear diary, one of the best days of my sweet life. I've lost my beautiful virginity to Carl Kennedy. At last. It hurt a little bit, but it happened. There was lots of blood. We did it in the church. Sorry, God, your friend Jenny. So picture this old church. They're wasted. There's candles on. They have sex in the pulpit on this carpet, and there's blood everywhere. So this made June angry. Mm-hmm. For Jennifer to lose her virginity before June was devastating. It was just another...
It was a competition.
Yeah. Jennifer now had the upper hand. She was the better twin now, so to speak.
Oh, my God.
What's worse is that Jennifer might have gotten pregnant. And having a baby was something that June wanted more than anything. So she thought this, okay, she loses her virginity and now she's going to have a baby. She's taking everything away from me. So now her hatred for her had turned malignant. 2 days after this evening, this very bizarre evening, Jennifer tried to kill June. Because she could sense June's desire to kill her.
Preemptive strike.
Yeah. So they were lying in bed listening to music. June turned off the music. She didn't want to listen to it anymore. Jennifer jumped off the top bunk, ripped the cord from the radio from the wall, wound it around June's neck, and began to strangle her with it. June fought her off, and Jennifer dropped the cord. And then they both started to cry and said they were sorry. Then they went on to drink an entire bottle of brandy and then went for a walk.
Ugh, brandy, a barf.
Yeah. They walked...
A couple glasses of brandy, I'd be barfing.
So June was watching Jennifer the whole time they were walking, thinking, okay, I can't trust her. She's crazy.
They're conniving behind each other's back.
Yeah. So they were walking along a field and they came to a stream and then they started to walk along the stream bed. And they got close to where there was a bridge crossing over it. I'm just going to play this clip and then I'll explain what happened afterwards.
We're fighting. I pushed her in the river. I said to myself, if I kill her now, maybe I'll have a happy life. No more hassle, no more stealing my personality, no more fighting, no more arguing. Get it over with. I pushed her in the river and I pushed her and held her down. I said, right, go on, die. Go and die.
You heard from her words she was trying to kill her sister. So June rushed at Jennifer, knocked her down in the water, bashed her head off of some rocks, and held her head underwater.
Jeez.
And if it wasn't for a car that drove over the bridge and sort of had like headlights came onto them, June probably would have killed her. So that snapped her out of it, and she let her, lift her head out of the water. And then apparently they fell into each other's arms saying, I love you, and begging God for mercy.
They're so messed up. It's so sad.
Yeah.
But it's like...
It is. It's tragic. It really is. This is one of the most wild stories I've ever heard. Again, this is not what I thought the Silent Twins was going to be about.
So being a twin, I understand, I'm very close to Anna and I'd be devastated if anything happened to her, but I want nothing but happiness for her. Like, there's no jealousy competition at all. Like, if she had more than me or whatever, I'd be so happy.
Yeah. I mean, I think but you guys are extra lovely, loving types anyway. But I mean, yeah, I think most twins, maybe I don't know. I'm not a twin, but, we were talking to our sister-in-law who's also a twin, and she was saying that her and her sister competed a lot. But healthy competition, but not, yeah. When I told her this story, she's like, what? Okay. So,
yeah, I'm like, what?
Yeah. A week later, June lost her virginity to Carl, which is just like, they had to lose their virginity to this horrific human being.
So they both slept with the same guy.
And I say horrific human being. I mean, he's 14 and really, he's fucked. Mm-hmm. They're all fucked. It's all like disturbing, but in the same token, it's also incredibly sad.
Yeah.
So the cycle of alcohol and drug use and emotional and physical and sexual abuse from Carl continued until July. So they thought all this that they were experiencing from Carl was love, or from the Kennedy brothers in general. They had no other idea of what love was. So they thought that this was how it was supposed to be. So in the first week of July, the Kennedy family moved back to the U.S. and the twins were devastated, and they even talked about suicide. Still, they believed that they had lived the best time of their lives and would look back on this summer with fondness. Again, I've got another clip here.
That was the summer of my life, that was. That's the best summer we ever had. The best summer and the last summer outside. That summer must have been the last summer we had for 12 years outside in the world, the real world.
So this is, I think, a good time to stop this episode.
Okay.
Because the next part is the next chapter in their lives.
Jennifer story.
Yeah, and it gets like, I mean, it leads to this obviously, but it's all the dysfunctional, awful things that happened this summer that they thought was the best time of their lives. She's even saying it right there. Leads to another chapter that gets really bad. Their crimes get really out of control and very dangerous, and they end up going to Broadmoor Hospital because of this. So I think this is a good break to take right here. So I hope you guys, if you could able to keep up. I could barely keep up with this.
Like bonking the head into
my
the
eyes
microphone.
are crossed. Yeah, Mary's getting a concussion from bonking her head. So yeah, we're gonna leave this story right here, and stay tuned because it gets even more wild and crazy. I know crazy is probably not the best word to use, but this is just a head shaker of a story. It's horrific. Like, it's so sad, so devious, so like I want to be their friends.
Well, they're troubled. They're so troubled.
Yeah, and I want to like snap them out of it at the same time and be like, cut your shit. But in the same token, be like, okay, you need a friend who's going to be, you know.
They needed serious counseling, serious psychiatric counseling.
And what is wrong with them? What is wrong with them? What is their diagnosis?
I don't know. I was thinking you should talk to Heather.
Yeah. Well, we'll break that down as we go into the next episode. But
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for listening to today's show.
Thank you, everybody.
I hope that you're doing well and enjoying the summer so far. I know on the other side of the world it's winter for you, but so I hope you're enjoying whatever season you're in. We really appreciate you guys listening to the show and being part of our Facebook group. If you haven't joined, please stop by and see if it's your cup of tea.
Yeah.
And you're all welcome. And also, if you have a second to leave an iTunes review, I'd really appreciate it.
Pretty please.
And maybe you can go check out our Patreon page and see some of the things that we have to offer there. But again, we appreciate all of you guys, and we hope that you're doing well. Remember to take care of yourselves and take care of each other, and most importantly, to love yourself.
Peace.
One love.
True crime and it gets none realer. Sometimes it'll be the cure that'll kill you. Gotta watch out, yeah, you gotta watch your back, cause you don't wanna be another episode on Stat. Thank you for tuning in, learn a thing or two. These medical mysteries can be unbelievable. Yeah, subscribe, make sure you do that so you'll be tuned in and be ready for the next show. Stat.